What if I told you there's a place where you can swim between two continents? Walk inside a glacier. Stand behind a waterfall. Touch thousand-year-old ice. Watch new land being born, all in one day. This isn't a dream. This is Iceland. Iceland sits on one of the most geologically violent spots on Earth, and I'm not exaggerating. Right beneath this island, two massive tectonic plates are literally tearing apart. The North American plate on one side, the Eurasian plate on the other. And Iceland, it's caught right in the middle. This isn't ancient history. This is happening right now as we speak. The plates are moving apart about 2 centimeters every year. That might not sound like much, but over millions of years, it's created this incredible island where volcanoes outnumber people's hometowns. Iceland has around 130 volcanoes. 30 of them are active. That's 30 mountains that could wake up and reshape the landscape at any moment. One volcano that recently reminded the world just how alive Iceland really is. Its name is Fagradalsfjall. Now, I know that's a mouthful. Icelandic words always are, but trust me, this volcano is worth learning about. For 800 years, this volcanic system slept peacefully in the Reykjanes Peninsula. 800 years of silence. Then, in March 2021, it woke up. But here's what made this eruption special. It wasn't violent or destructive. Instead, imagine a giant crack opening in the earth. And from that crack, rivers of glowing lava began to pour out. Bright orange and red, hot enough to melt metal, flowing like honey down the mountainside. The lava was so hot when it first emerged. It glowed bright red at over 1,000 degrees Celsius. That's hot enough to vaporize water instantly. As it flowed away from the source, it started cooling, forming a black crust on top while underneath, the molten rock kept moving. And here's the crazy part. Because Fagradalsfjall is so close to Reykjavik, the capital city, thousands of people hiked up to watch the eruption in person. Can you imagine? Watching the Earth give birth to new land right before your eyes. But with that beauty comes danger. Even after an eruption stops, the ground stays hot. You might be walking on what looks like solid black rock, but just beneath that thin layer, there could be lava hot enough to burn through your boots in seconds. Now, Fagradalsfjall isn't alone. There's a baby volcano in the same system called Litli Hrútur, which means little ram. When it erupts, the show is even more spectacular. Instead of one big explosion, you get a line of fire. Picture a crack in the ground, maybe 100 meters long, and from that entire crack, lava fountains shoot up into the sky. It's like the earth unzipped itself and started bleeding fire. Over time, the volcanic material builds up around these cracks, forming cones. Eventually, you get a more traditional volcano shape with a crater at the top. But in those early days, it's pure, raw, chaotic creation, this is what makes Iceland so special. In most places on Earth, you read about how volcanoes formed millions of years ago. Here, you can watch it happen. You can see new land being born. But not all of Iceland's volcanic activity happens in the open air. Some of the most powerful forces are hidden beneath ice. And that combination, fire under ice, creates some of the most dangerous eruptions on the planet. Let me tell you about Jökulsárlón. Yes, that's the volcano that shut down European air travel back in 2010. You probably remember the chaos. Even if you couldn't pronounce the name, Jökulsárlón is what we call a glacier volcano. Its peak is covered by a thick ice cap. Now, imagine what happens when hot magma rises up through that ice. The ice doesn't just melt, it explodes. When Jökulsárlón erupted in 2010, the interaction between the magma and the ice created massive amounts of volcanic ash. This ash was so fine, so abrasive, that it could destroy jet engines. Within hours, the ash cloud spread across Europe and over 100,000 flights were cancelled. 10 million passengers were stranded. The world watched as this tiny island brought modern air travel to its knees. Not through terrorism or war, but through the raw power of nature. And here's the thing that keeps scientists up at night. Jökulsárlón has a big sister. Her name is Katla. Katla is one of Iceland's most feared volcanoes. She sits under the Fagradalsfjall glacier, hidden from view but constantly monitored. In Icelandic folklore, Katla was a cruel witch who, when pursued by her enemies, threw herself into the volcano. Now her anger fuels the eruptions. Katla erupts about twice every century. Major, powerful eruptions that reshape the landscape. And she's been quiet for over 100 years now. Scientists watch her carefully. They have instruments measuring every tremor, every movement of magma beneath the ice. Because when Katla wakes up, and she will, the eruption could be 10 times more powerful than Jökulsárlón. Within Katla's volcanic system lies Elja, the largest volcanic canyon in the world. When this fissure erupted back in the year 939, it produced one of the largest lava floods in recorded history. The eruption lasted years, years of continuous lava flow, reshaping Iceland's south. You might be wondering, why do people live here? With all this danger, why call Iceland home? The answer is simple. The same forces that threaten also provide. All that geothermal heat beneath the ground. Icelanders have learned to harness it. Hot water flows naturally from the earth, heated by magma chambers miles below. This water is piped directly into homes for heating. It powers geothermal power plants that generate clean, renewable electricity. In the middle of winter, when the rest of Europe is freezing, Icelanders are swimming in naturally heated outdoor pools. It's a deal with the devil, in a way. Live with the danger of eruptions, and in return, get unlimited hot water and power straight from the earth itself. And speaking of hot water, let's talk about one of Iceland's most famous attractions. created entirely by this geothermal activity. If volcanoes are Iceland's fire, then glaciers are its ice. And nowhere is this more apparent than when you stand before Vatnajökull. Vatnajökull isn't just a glacier, it's a giant. It's the largest glacier in Europe by volume and the second largest by area. This single ice cap covers 8% of Iceland's entire landmass. Think about that for a second. 8% of a country frozen solid. To put it in perspective, Vatnajökull is bigger than all the glaciers in continental Europe combined. It's so massive that it creates its own weather systems. Clouds form around it, storms brew above it. When you walk on a glacier like Vatnajökull, you're walking on history. That ice beneath your feet could be hundreds, even thousands of years old. Each layer represents a different winter, a different year in Earth's long story. The ice isn't uniform white like you might expect. In the deeper, older sections, it turns this incredible shade of blue. This happens because the ice is so compressed, so dense, that it absorbs all colors of light except blue. That blue is pure, ancient ice, compressed by its own weight over centuries. But glaciers aren't static. They're rivers of ice, flowing slowly down from the mountains to the valleys below. And as they move, they crack and fracture. These cracks are called crevasses, and they're both beautiful and deadly. They form perpendicular to the glacier's flow, creating these intricate patterns across the ice surface. Some crevasses are shallow, just a few meters deep. Others drop down into darkness, bottomless blue holes in the ice. As the climate warms, these glaciers are melting. It's a slow process, but it's happening. And this melting creates something unexpected and beautiful. Meltwater streams run through and under the glaciers, carving channels in the ice. This water is unlike any you've seen before. It's this ethereal turquoise blue color, almost glowing in the sunlight. The color comes from something called glacial flour. As the glacier moves, it grinds the rock beneath it into powder so fine it stays suspended in the water. This powder scatters light in a way that creates that magical blue-green color. These meltwater rivers eventually flow into the ocean. But along the way, they create some of Iceland's most stunning features. Let me take you to a place that looks like it belongs on another planet. It's called Jökulsárlón, the Glacier Lagoon. About a century ago, the Reynisfjara glacier, which extends from Vatnajökull, started retreating. As it pulled back, it left behind a depression that filled with meltwater. That depression became Jökulsárlón. Today, this lagoon is Iceland's deepest lake, and it's still growing as the glacier continues to retreat. But what makes Jökulsárlón truly magical are the icebergs. Huge chunks of ice break off from the glacier and float in the lagoon like frozen ships. They drift slowly, pushed by wind and current, creating an ever-changing landscape. Each iceberg is unique. Some are pure white, filled with air bubbles trapped when the ice formed. Others are that intense blue color, showing their age and density. Some even have black streaks running through them. Volcanic ash from ancient eruptions trapped in the ice. seals love this place. They swim between the icebergs, hunting for fish. In winter, when there are no orcas or sharks to threaten them, this becomes a seal paradise. You'll see their heads popping up between the ice, curious and unafraid. But the story doesn't end at the lagoon. There's a short river connecting Jökulsárlón to the Atlantic Ocean, and icebergs slowly drift through it, carried by the current. When they reach the ocean, the waves take over. They push these icebergs onto a black sand beach, where they rest like diamonds on velvet. This is Diamond Beach, and it's one of the most photographed places in Iceland. The contrast is stunning. Black volcanic sand, white and blue ice, and the grey Atlantic Ocean beyond. The ice chunks range in size from small crystals to pieces bigger than cars. As the sun hits the ice, it becomes translucent, glowing from within. Each piece is a sculpture carved by nature, shaped by waves and wind. And they're constantly changing. Waves break pieces apart. Melting reshapes them. New icebergs arrive with each tide. It's temporary art on a massive scale. Now, if you really want to see something incredible, you need to go inside the glaciers themselves. Ice caves form in glaciers through a combination of meltwater and geothermal heat. In summer, water flows through and beneath the glacier, carving tunnels and chambers. In winter, this water freezes again, creating these incredible ice cathedrals. The walls inside are sculpted and smooth, shaped by flowing water over time. The ceiling glows with that same intense blue color, light filtering through meters of compressed ice. It's like standing inside a sapphire. But these caves are temporary. They form, exist for a season or two, then collapse or melt away. Each winter, new caves form in different locations. It's a treasure hunt for guides who know the glaciers, searching for safe caves to show visitors. Walking through an ice cave is surreal. Everything is blue: the walls, the ceiling, the floor. Sound behaves strangely, echoing in unexpected ways. You're surrounded by ice that could be centuries old, standing in a space that might not exist next year. Before we leave the world of ice, I want to tell you about something uniquely Icelandic: the Icelandic horse. These aren't just horses that happen to live in Iceland. They're a distinct breed that's been pure for over 1,000 years. When the Vikings first settled Iceland, they brought horses with them. Then Iceland passed a law. No more horses could be imported, ever. This meant the breed stayed pure, isolated on this island for more than a millennium. Icelandic horses are smaller than most breeds, but don't let their size fool you. They're incredibly strong and have extraordinary endurance. They've adapted to survive harsh winters, finding food even when the ground is covered in snow. They're also one of the few horse breeds that have 5 gaits instead of the usual 3 or 4. This includes a gait called the tolt, which is so smooth that riders can carry a full glass of water without spilling a drop. You'll see these horses everywhere in Iceland, grazing in fields with glaciers as their backdrop. wandering near black sand beaches, standing stoically in snowstorms. They're as much a part of Iceland's landscape as the ice and fire themselves. Now, when fire creates land and ice shapes it, water becomes the final sculptor. And nowhere does water perform better than in Iceland's waterfalls. Iceland has so many waterfalls that they haven't even named them all. Every river that flows from the mountains to the sea seems to find a cliff to drop from. And when you have glaciers melting on top of volcanic rock, you get waterfalls that are nothing short of spectacular. Let's start with the most powerful, Dettifoss. The name itself sounds powerful, doesn't it? This waterfall is a monster. It's 45 meters high and 100 meters wide, and the amount of water flowing over it every second is incredible. We're talking about 400 cubic meters of water per second. That's like having 40 swimming pools worth of water pouring over the edge every single second. The sound is deafening. As you approach Dettifoss, you feel it before you see it. The ground vibrates. The air is full of mist. And then you reach the edge and see this massive curtain of water plunging into the canyon below. The water isn't clear. It's brown and muddy, filled with that glacial flour we talked about earlier. This gives the waterfall an even more raw, powerful appearance. This isn't some pretty little cascade. This is nature at its most brutal and impressive. Dettifoss sits in a massive canyon carved by thousands of years of water flow. The canyon walls are dark basalt, contrasting with the white foam of the waterfall. In winter, the edges freeze, creating ice formations that look like frozen explosions. If Dettifoss is about power, then Gullfoss is about beauty and majesty. Gullfoss means golden falls, and on sunny days you can see why. The spray from the waterfall catches the light, creating rainbows and giving the water a golden glow. This waterfall has two drops. The first is 11 meters, the second 21 meters. But what makes it special is the angle. The water doesn't just fall straight down. It drops into a narrow canyon that turns 90 degrees. So the water seems to disappear into the earth itself. There's a legend about Gullfoss that I love. In the early 1900s, foreign investors wanted to build a power plant using the waterfall. The daughter of the farmer who owned the land, Sigríður Tómasdóttir, was furious. She threatened to throw herself into the waterfall if the project went ahead. She walked barefoot to Reykjavik, a journey of over 100 kilometers to fight the decision. Eventually she won, and Gullfoss was preserved. Today, there's a memorial to her near the waterfall. One woman's determination saved one of Iceland's greatest natural wonders. Now, some waterfalls don't demand to be viewed from a distance. Some invite you to come closer, to walk behind them and see the world through falling water. Seljalandsfoss is one of these. It drops 60 meters from a cliff that was once Iceland's coastline, back when the sea reached further inland. Behind the waterfall, there's a path, a wet, slippery, absolutely incredible path that lets you walk in a complete circle around the falls. Walking behind Seljalandsfoss is like entering another dimension. The sound of the water is all around you. Spray soaks you within seconds. And when you turn around and look out through the falling water, you see Iceland framed by a curtain of water. In winter, this becomes even more magical. The constant spray freezes on everything nearby, creating ice sculptures and frozen formations. The path becomes treacherous with ice, but the view, absolutely worth it. Some waterfalls carry more than just water. They carry history and meaning. Dettifoss, the waterfall of the gods, has a story that changed Iceland forever. In the year 1000, Iceland faced a crisis. The country was split between believers in the Old Norse gods and those converting to Christianity. A man named Thorgeir, the law speaker, was tasked with making a decision that would unite the country. The story says he lay under firs for a day and a night, seeking guidance. When he emerged, he declared that Iceland would be Christian. To prove his commitment, Thorgeir gathered all his statues of the Norse gods and threw them into this waterfall. From that day on, it was called Dettifoss, the waterfall of the gods. Whether the story is entirely true or not, Dettifoss is beautiful. It's wide and horseshoe-shaped, with water cascading over a 12-meter drop. In winter, it partially freezes, creating these incredible ice formations that look like the gods themselves might live there. Not all of Iceland's waterfalls are famous. Some are hidden, tucked away in narrow canyons or behind cliffs, waiting to be discovered. Gljufrabui is one of these secret waterfalls. Its name means dweller of the gorge, and it's literally hidden inside a narrow canyon. You can't see it from the road. You can't even see it until you're almost standing underneath it. To reach Gljufrabui, you have to wade through a shallow stream and squeeze through a narrow opening in the rock. And then, suddenly, you're in this enclosed chamber with a waterfall cascading down, surrounded by moss-covered walls. It's like discovering a secret room in nature's house. But my favorite waterfalls in Iceland are the ones that showcase the unique relationship between fire and water. Hraunfossar, the lava falls, is a series of waterfalls that spring directly out of a lava field. There's no river feeding them, no single source. Instead, water seeps through the porous lava rock and emerges from the cliff face as hundreds of small streams. These streams flow over the rock and into the Vita River below, creating this beautiful cascade that seems to come from nowhere. The water is crystal clear, having been filtered through years of flowing through volcanic rock. According to legend, a sorcerer diverted a river to create Hraunfossar. But the real story is even more interesting. About 1,000 years ago, a volcanic eruption created the lava field. As water from the nearby Vatnajökull glacier seeps through this porous rock, it emerges at Hraunfossar. It's like the earth is crying, but with the purest water you've ever seen. Some waterfalls are impressive, not just for their size, but for their setting. Svartifoss, the Black Falls, is surrounded by basalt columns that look like organ pipes or a natural cathedral. When lava cools slowly, it contracts and fractures into these hexagonal columns. At Svartifoss, these columns frame the waterfall perfectly, creating one of Iceland's most photographed scenes. The contrast is stunning. White water against black rock, falling into a pool littered with broken columns that have fallen over millennia. This waterfall inspired Icelandic architecture. if you look at the Hallgrímskirkja church in Reykjavik, you'll see its design mirrors these basalt columns. Nature inspiring human creation, a perfect circle. Iceland sits on a hot spot, literally. Beneath the island, magma is closer to the surface than almost anywhere else on Earth. And this creates something truly special. Geothermal fields where the Earth seems to come alive. Let's talk about the place that gave the world a word, geyser. That's right. The word geyser that we use in English comes from this one spot in Iceland. The Great Geyser has been erupting for about 800 years, though not continuously. Here's how a geyser works. Underground, there's a chamber filled with water. Heat from magma below raises the temperature, but the water can't boil because of the pressure from the water above it. The temperature keeps rising past the normal boiling point, creating what's called superheated water. Eventually, something triggers the release. Maybe a bubble rises, maybe the pressure just gets too much. Suddenly, all that superheated water flashes to steam, and boom! A column of boiling water shoots into the sky. The Great Geyser itself is unpredictable now. Sometimes earthquakes wake it up, and it erupts every few minutes. Other times, it sleeps for years. But its neighbor, Strokkur, performs on schedule. Strokkur erupts every 5 to 10 minutes like clockwork. Watching it is hypnotic. First, you see the pool of water bulging, rising up like a dome. Then it drops back. Then it rises again, higher this time, and then, with a roar, it explodes upward. A column of boiling water shoots 20 to 30 meters into the air. For a few seconds, you're watching a liquid tower. Then gravity wins and the water crashes back down, splashing into the pool. The crowd gasps, cameras click, and everyone waits for the next eruption. Standing near Strokkur, you can feel the heat rising from the ground. The air smells of sulfur. Steam rises from cracks in the rock. The ground itself is painted in oranges, reds, and yellows from mineral deposits. This is what happens when Earth's interior is close enough to touch. If you want to see something that looks truly alien, visit Verir. This geothermal field at the base of Mount Namafjall is like a window into hell. The ground is colored in reds, oranges, and yellows. Steam vents called fumaroles hiss and spout constantly. And everywhere, mud pots bubble and plop like some witch's cauldron. Mud pots form when steam rises through clay and soil. The heat and acidic gases break down the rock into mud, and the steam keeps it bubbling. Some bubble gently, making soft, plopping sounds. Others erupt violently, throwing mud into the air. Walking through Verir, you have to stay on the wooden walkways. The ground is unstable, acidic, and hot enough to burn through boots. One wrong step, and you could break through a thin crust into boiling mud underneath. The smell is overwhelming. Hydrogen sulfide, the rotten egg smell, is everywhere. It's the smell of volcanic gases escaping from deep underground. But despite the inhospitable conditions, life finds a way. Certain bacteria thrive in these extreme temperatures, giving some pools their bright colors. These organisms are called thermophils, heat lovers, and they're some of the oldest forms of life on Earth. Scientists study these bacteria because they might be similar to the first life forms that appeared on our planet billions of years ago, when Earth itself was a volcanic hellscape. Not all geothermal features are natural. Some are happy accidents. The Blue Lagoon is Iceland's most famous geothermal spa, and it's completely man-made. Back in 1976, the Svartsengi geothermal power plant was built. This plant pumps superheated water from underground to generate electricity. After the water passes through the turbines, it's still hot, around 37 to 39 degrees Celsius. Rather than waste it, they pump it into a lava field, creating a warm lagoon. People with psoriasis, a skin condition, started bathing in the water and noticed their symptoms improved. Word spread, and eventually the Blue Lagoon became a destination. Today, it's one of Iceland's most visited attractions. The milky blue water is rich in silica, algae, and minerals. The silica gives it that distinctive color and also makes it feel silky on your skin. Floating in the Blue Lagoon, surrounded by black lava rocks, with steam rising all around you, is surreal. In winter, it's even better. The air temperature might be below freezing, but the water is perfectly warm. Snow falls on your face while your body is submerged in hot water. It's a perfect example of Iceland's contrasts. Fire and ice, comfort and harsh nature, all in one place. But you don't need to visit a famous spa to experience geothermal water. Iceland is full of natural hot springs hidden in mountains and valleys. Reynisfjara, the steam valley, has a river that's heated by geothermal activity. You can hike up into the mountains, and at a certain point, the river is warm enough to bathe in. Local Icelanders have been doing this for centuries. After a long day of work, they'd hike up to the hot river, soak their tired muscles, and hike back down. There are natural pools all over Iceland. Some are maintained and have changing rooms. Others are just pools in the rock that happen to be warm. Finding and bathing in a secret hot spring with no one else around is one of the great joys of exploring Iceland. But geothermal energy isn't just for bathing. Iceland has learned to harness this power for electricity and heating. About 85% of houses in Iceland are heated with geothermal water. Think about that. In one of the coldest countries in the world, people rarely burn fuel to heat their homes. Instead, naturally hot water is piped directly from underground. Geothermal power plants generate about a quarter of Iceland's electricity. The rest comes from hydroelectric power, meaning Iceland runs on almost 100% renewable energy. This is possible because Iceland sits on so much geothermal activity. Drill down almost anywhere and you'll hit hot rock. Pump water down, it heats up and comes back as steam. And that steam drives turbines to generate electricity. It's clean, renewable, and practically unlimited as long as you manage it sustainably. Iceland has become a model for geothermal energy, and countries around the world are looking to Iceland to learn how to harness this power. When most people think of beaches, they picture golden sand, palm trees, and warm sunshine. Iceland's beaches are different. Reynisfjara is one of the most famous beaches in Iceland. And when you first see it, you understand why. The sand is black, not dark brown, not grey, black. This sand is formed from volcanic rock that's been eroded by waves and wind over thousands of years. Lava that once flowed into the ocean cooled, shattered, and was ground down into fine particles. Walking on this black sand is strange. It's soft like regular sand, but the color makes everything feel different, almost otherworldly. But Reynisfjara isn't famous just for its black sand. The beach is backed by incredible basalt columns that look like they were carved by giants. These columns are hexagonal, perfectly geometric, stacked together like the world's largest honeycomb. They were formed when lava flowed and cooled slowly. As it cooled, it contracted and fractured into these incredible shapes. It's pure geometry created by physics and chemistry. Off the coast of Reynisfjara, rising from the waves, are the Reynisdrangar sea stacks. These are massive pillars of rock standing alone in the ocean, battered by waves. According to Icelandic legend, these aren't just rocks, they're trolls. The story goes that two trolls tried to drag a 3-masted ship to shore, but they worked through the night and didn't notice the sun rising. When the first light of dawn hit them, they turned to stone, frozen forever as a warning to other trolls. The scientific explanation is less magical but equally impressive. These are the remnants of old cliffs. Over millennia, the ocean has eroded the softer rock, leaving only these harder pillars standing. But here's the thing, Reynisfjara, for all its beauty, is incredibly dangerous. The waves here are called sneaker waves, and they're deadly. You'll be standing well back from the water, thinking you're safe, when suddenly a wave much larger than the others surges up the beach. People have been swept into the ocean and drowned. The undertow is so strong that even strong swimmers can't fight it. The water is barely above freezing. You have minutes before hypothermia sets in. So while Reynisfjara is stunning, it demands respect. Nature here is beautiful but brutal. We talked about Diamond Beach earlier, but I want to take you back there because it perfectly captures Iceland's coastal magic. These icebergs that wash up on the black sand create a contrast so striking that it almost doesn't look real. Photographers come from around the world to capture this scene, but it's constantly changing. Every tide brings new ice. Every wave reshapes the pieces that are there. You could visit twice in the same day and see completely different sculptures. In the early morning or late evening, when the light is soft and golden, the ice glows. It becomes translucent, catching and refracting light. Blues, whites, and even hints of green shimmer in the ice. And all of this is set against that black volcanic sand, with waves crashing in the background. It's a photographer's paradise. Near Reynisfjara is Dyrhólaey, a small promontory with one of Iceland's most distinctive features. A natural arch large enough for a boat to sail through. The name literally means Door Hill Island. It was once an island, but over time, a tombolo, a strip of land, connected it to the mainland. The arch was carved by the relentless power of waves. Water forced into cracks, freezing in winter and expanding, slowly breaking the rock apart over thousands of years. Standing on top of Dyrhólaey, you get a panoramic view of Iceland's south coast. Black beaches stretch in both directions. Glaciers gleam white in the distance, and below, waves crash against dark cliffs. This is also one of the best places to see puffins during summer. These colourful birds nest in the cliffs, thousands of them, coming to land only to breed before returning to the ocean. Nature sometimes creates things that look deliberately sculpted, even though they're entirely accidental. On Heimaey, the main island of the Westman Islands, there's a rock formation that looks exactly like an elephant. Not kind of like an elephant, exactly like one. You can see the trunk, the head, even the texture that looks like wrinkled skin. It's called Elephant Rock, obviously. And it's become one of those Instagram famous spots that people seek out. The formation is basalt, shaped by erosion from wind and waves. It's purely coincidental that it looks like an elephant. But standing there, looking at it, it's hard to believe nature created it by accident. On the northern coast, in Hunaflói Bay, another rock formation rises from the sea. This one is called Vatnajökull, and it looks like a dragon or dinosaur drinking from the ocean. Like the Reynisfjara, there's a legend attached to it. The story says it's a troll who was caught by sunrise while trying to destroy a nearby monastery. Turned to stone mid-drink, it's remained there ever since. The rock has holes through it, worn by waves, which add to its creature-like appearance. Birds nest in these holes. White stains from their droppings covering the dark rock, giving it a two-tone appearance. Vatnajökull stands about 15 meters tall, and it's slowly being eroded by the sea. Eventually, probably in a few more centuries, it will collapse. But for now, it guards the coast like a petrified sentinel. Iceland's landscape is incredible. But the human story here is equally fascinating. This is a land where ancient traditions meet modern life, where people still believe in hidden folk, and where names follow rules from the Viking Age. Iceland was one of the last places in Europe to be settled by humans. When the Vikings arrived in the 9th century, they found an empty island, no indigenous people, no large predators, just land waiting to be claimed. The first permanent settler was Ingolfur Arnason, a Norwegian Viking who arrived in 874 AD. According to the sagas, when he saw Iceland's coast, he threw the pillars from his chieftain's seat overboard and vowed to settle wherever they washed ashore. They landed in what is now Reykjavik, which means Smoky Bay, named for the steam from geothermal vents that Ingolfur saw rising from the shore. More Vikings followed, mostly from Norway, though they brought Celtic slaves and wives from Ireland and Scotland. This mix created the Icelandic people, whose genetics show both Nordic and Celtic heritage. In 930 AD, Icelanders did something remarkable. They established the Alþingi, a parliament that's one of the oldest in the world. They chose Thingvellir, the rift valley where tectonic plates meet, as its location. Every summer, people from all over Iceland would travel there to settle disputes, make laws, and make deals. There was no king in Iceland, no single ruler. Instead, chieftains shared power and made decisions collectively. It was a form of democracy, though limited to free men. The Alþingi continued for centuries and still exist today, making Iceland's parliament one of the few institutions that can trace its lineage back over 1,000 years. Now, here's where things get interesting. A significant portion of Icelanders believe in, or at least won't deny the existence of, Huldufólk, the hidden people. These aren't tiny fairies. They're human-sized beings who live in rocks and hills, invisible to most people. They're generally peaceful but don't like being disturbed. This belief affects real life. Construction projects have been rerouted to avoid disturbing rocks where elves supposedly live. There are elf churches and elf homes marked throughout the countryside. Before you dismiss this as superstition, consider the environment. When you're living in a landscape as dramatic and strange as Iceland, where mist and fog create shapes, where long dark winters play tricks on your mind, the idea of hidden folk doesn't seem so strange. And maybe, just maybe, it's also about respecting nature. By believing certain rocks house elves, Icelanders protect natural formations that might otherwise be destroyed. Icelandic naming traditions are unique. People don't have family surnames passed down through generations. Instead, they use patronymics or matronymics. If your father's name is John, your last name is Jonsson, son of John, or Jonsdottir, daughter of Jon. If your mother's name is Anna and you want to honor her instead, you'd be Anusson or Anudottir. This means that family members don't share last names in the way we're used to. A father named Olafur Jonsson might have a daughter named Kristín Olafsdóttir. Different last names, but clearly related. There's also an approved list of names you can choose from. You can't just make up a name for your child. It has to be on the approved list, which contains about 1,800 male names and 1,850 female names. This might seem restrictive, but it preserves Icelandic language and tradition. The names on the list fit Icelandic grammar and can be properly declined in the language's complex case system. Icelandic Christmas traditions are wonderfully weird. Instead of one Santa Claus, Iceland has 13 Yule lads. These are troll-like beings who live in the mountains with their mother, Grýla, a giantess who eats naughty children. Starting 13 days before Christmas, one Yule lad comes to town each night. Each one has a name describing his particular mischief. There's Stekkjastar, who harasses sheep, Gildjagor, who hides in gullies to steal milk, Stubur, who's abnormally short and steals pans to eat the crust left on them, and so on. Children place their shoes in their bedroom windows. If they've been good, the Yule lad leaves a small gift. If they've been naughty, they get a raw potato. And if you don't receive new clothes before Christmas Eve, the Yule cat, an enormous feline monster, might eat you. This tradition supposedly encouraged people to finish their work before winter and rewarded those who did with new clothes. Icelandic food is shaped by necessity. For centuries, this was a poor country with limited resources. Nothing could be wasted. This led to dishes like hakal, fermented shark. Greenland shark meat is actually poisonous when fresh because of high urea content. But if you bury it with stones for a few months, then hang it to dry for several more months, the toxins break down and it becomes edible. The result smells like ammonia and tastes like very strong cheese. It's an acquired taste, to put it mildly. But it represents Icelandic resourcefulness, making food from what others would throw away. Svid, Sind sheep's head, is another traditional dish. The head is cut in half, the brain and hair removed, and it's boiled or cured. Every part of the sheep was used because nothing could be wasted. Modern Icelanders don't eat these foods regularly, but they're part of Thorrablót, a midwinter festival where traditional foods are served. It's a way of honoring the past and remembering the hardships their ancestors endured. Today's Iceland is a far cry from the poor farming and fishing nation it once was. It's one of the wealthiest countries per capita in the world. The average salary is around $85,000 per year. Healthcare and education are excellent. It regularly ranks as one of the happiest countries on Earth. Iceland was also the first country to make it illegal to pay women less than men for the same work. Gender equality is taken seriously here. The literacy rate is nearly 100%, and Icelanders are among the world's most avid readers. They publish more books per capita than any other country. There's even a word for the phenomenon of buying more books than you can read: bókflóð, the book flood. Most Icelanders speak at least 3 languages: Icelandic, English, and Danish. The population is highly educated, with a large percentage holding university degrees. Perhaps what makes Icelanders most unique is their relationship with their extreme environment. They live on an island that's constantly trying to freeze, burn, flood, or blow them away. But rather than fight nature, they've learned to work with it. They harness geothermal power instead of fearing volcanoes. They build around lava fields instead of clearing them. They adapt their homes and lifestyles to the long, dark winters and the bright summers. There's a saying in Iceland: if you don't like the weather, wait 5 minutes. The weather can change from sunshine to blizzard to rain to sunshine again in less than an hour. Rather than letting this stop them, Icelanders just prepare for everything. They don't cancel plans because of weather. They dress appropriately and carry on. This resilience, this ability to thrive in one of the harshest environments on Earth defines Icelandic culture. If this journey through Iceland left you speechless, hit that like button. Subscribe, because we're exploring more incredible places like this. And here's my question for you. If you could visit just one location we covered today, which would it be and why? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one.